All right, good evening, everyone. I hope I'm coming through to you loud and clear. Thank you for sticking with us. We've had a few technical issues this evening. It looks like things are okay for us so far. If we do drop out at some point during the evening, I apologize for that. We'll try and reconnect as soon as we can. You've joined us for session 4 in our series on managing anxiety in your family. This is the last session in our series. I hope you've enjoyed it so far and you've either been able to join us live or been able to catch up on some of the recordings. You'll have plenty of chances during this session to ask lots of questions and to interact with us. We'll be reviewing some of the content that we've covered so far, and we hope you've had a chance to do some practice at home so that you can put some questions to Meredith and comment on how things are going. We also had an issue last week where the recording didn't work, so we apologize for that. You wouldn't have received that via your email. That's why this session is particularly important, I think, because as we're reviewing, you can ask questions if you feel like we haven't had a chance to go into it in enough detail. So I won't say too much more for now. I'd just like to do a couple of acknowledgements. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge the Victorian Government for generously supporting these webinars. That's why we're able to bring them to you for free at no charge to you all around Australia. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting tonight. That's for us in Melbourne, the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay our respects to elders past and present, as well as acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us tonight. So your presenter once again is Meredith Rayner. We don't need to introduce her again in any detail. You're familiar with Meredith by now. Without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Meredith, and you'll be hearing from me again throughout to talk about questions and that kind of.
Great. Thanks, Tony. And thanks for being patient, everybody. As Tony said, well, we've had a couple of technical difficulties. So we're hoping we hang in there and hoping that we don't have any more issues as we go through. But as Tony said, this is session 4 in a series of webinars. We've covered lots of talk about anxiety and what some of the important things are to understand about anxiety. Had a bit of a practice or introduction and a practice over the last couple of weeks of a number of skills that we're hoping can help you manage anxiety. And this week we're going to talk about why it can be hard and what you can do next. We will also spend a bit of time, or quite a bit of time actually, on what we covered last week, just because the recording didn't work, as Tony mentioned, and I know a number of you were hoping to be able to listen to it. So what I'll do is I'll weave quite a bit of last week's content into this week as well. So if you missed last week and you haven't been able to get to the recording, don't panic. We'll cover a bit of it tonight. And I think after tonight, the slides are going out. Would that be?
We have sent a handout around that included the slides so far, so people who have had a chance to look at that.
Have a look at that.
Yeah, okay. But we can always send around more.
Okay, great. And just reminding everybody and me as well that this course is for anybody who suffers anxiety. So what we found over the last few weeks is the majority of the people who are participating with us are here relating to children, so either mostly their own children, but we've also got lots of professionals who work with children, so teachers and maternal child health nurses and counsellors and those kind of people. So the way I word the language a little bit is around how you help your child, but just keep in mind that this is suitable for anybody. So even though I might be saying child a bit, I also mean you can use the same techniques with yourself and also with adults, so husbands or wives or partners, sisters, brothers or parents, anybody who might be experiencing anxiety. Some of the techniques that we're covering in the webinar over the last couple of weeks will be useful. As Tony said, you know me by now, I hope, so we won't spend too much time reintroducing myself. I guess just enough to say I'm a psychologist and I've worked with families for a while. So we thought we would start off tonight with a little bit of home practice. So what we're going to do is just have an opportunity to let you guys let us know, I guess, whether or not how you've gone with emotion coaching practice. So we might try and do that a little bit by the chat. Is how we found it worked best in the last couple of weeks. So if anybody's got any examples of situations, what we asked for you to have a go at last week was have a go at doing emotion coaching, using your emotion coaching skills in a situation that occurred at home, and then maybe share that example with us. So some of them might be examples that worked really well, and some of them might be ones that got a bit tricky, and we can have a go at working through a few of them just for the first couple of minutes of tonight. And then after that, we will, I've got a little bit more content and a bit more practice that we're going to have a go at together. So while you're typing away, I can see a few of you are typing away already, which is terrific. There was a question just popped up there a second ago again about the recording for last week, so I'll just mention it again. So there was a technical difficulty last week and the recording didn't work, so that's why you won't have received the link. So we're very sorry for that. It was something outside of our control. But what we are going to do is we've sent you home the slides from last week, and we're going to cover a little bit of that content again this week. So we'll make sure that there isn't any new content that you've missed if you're able to join us tonight. Okay, so I might have a look at some of the examples here. Okay. So so there's some examples here of situations, but what we were really looking for is whether or not you had a go at emotion coaching. Oh, great. Okay, yeah, so there's a great example here. Thanks, Ms. D, who you sent your response to in a couple of bits, so I was wondering if we were going to get all of it there, so which is great. So you had a situation where your son had to cook a 3-course meal and was very anxious, in capital letters, about cooking, cooking the meal. So I can see that that was quite an issue. And it sounds like you use the emotion coaching, so you're noticing that he was feeling anxious and just kind of sitting with that for a minute and reflecting back to him how he was feeling and just waiting until he was ready. And it sounded like he was able to persevere, and they got an excellent meal, which sounds like a bonus. And the son, Ms. D's son, was really proud of himself, which is terrific. And I think, oh, great, yeah. So Ms. D's also letting us know there about the symptoms that he's experiencing, which are really common anxiety symptoms, aren't they? Red in the face and teary, rapid breathing and sweaty. And I wonder what you often find in that situation is that the first thing you want to do is try and fix it for them. So when you can see that your son's really anxious about having to do this task, you might be really keen to quickly jump in and say, that's okay, it'll be all right, I can help you, calm down, don't panic, it'll be fine. All those kind of words that where you're trying to be helpful and you're trying to calm them down, but sometimes the message you're actually giving them is it's not okay to feel like that, and you have to stop being anxious, and it's not something to be anxious or worried about. Whereas if you're able to stop and just stay calm, which sounds like what's happened here, and let them know that it's okay to be anxious, it's okay to feel nervous about something, and just be patient and wait, they're able to calm down enough to regulate their own emotions, and they're learning the skills to be able to manage those emotions themselves. That's fantastic, Ms. D. Great job. I'm really pleased to hear that was helpful. And what your son will have learnt from that, hopefully, is an experience that you can feel anxious about something, and you can notice that you're feeling anxious and have all those symptoms, but you can slow yourself down and persevere, and you can do what you need to do anyway, which is great. Okay, we're just getting a couple of messages about sound not working and slides not loading for Emily, but it looks like everybody else seems to be able to connect in. So
just do us a favour, folks. If it is working for someone, let us know in the chat, because then we'll know it's more of a localized problem just for some people.
Oh yeah,
working for some
lots
people.
of working,
Right,
yeah.
so Emily, it might
Great,
be at
thanks.
your end, unfortunately, something to do with your device or network. Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Great. Carry on there. I'm just going to switch to another laptop while you're talking.
Okay. Tony's just very expertly trying to handle all the technical difficulties at home there, which is terrific. Perhaps we had a little bit of problem at the start too, as we mentioned earlier. So if you're having difficulties, maybe shut down and restart, or try and open up in another browser, which is what we've done here, and it seems to be working now. But don't panic if you can't hear us or the slides can't load. The recording will come out shortly. Great. Okay, so that's terrific. If anybody else thinks of some examples as we go through tonight, feel free to pop them up in the chat. So it doesn't matter if it's later on, if one pops into your mind, let us know and we'll talk them through. Whether emotion coaching worked for you or whether it didn't work for you, we're happy to hear how it went and see if we can work a few things out together in an environment where we've got time to kind of think it through and discuss it, rather than trying to get all the skills right in the heat of the moment when everything's happening right in front of you. Okay, so I guess a couple of things just I mentioned we might recap on a few of the things we covered last week. So what I might do, this slide's a little bit small. So Tony, can you turn the camera off? Do I just click down there? We might just turn the camera off, guys, which will make the slide bigger for you to be able to see. There you go. Thank you, Tony. So what we're thinking about here, this is a little bit of practice at I guess the key message that we learnt, we were introduced to in week 1 and we really practiced in week 2, which is this idea that all feelings are okay. And this is a really key thing to learn in terms of dealing with anxiety, really in terms of dealing with any strong emotion, so anger or frustration or grief. But in this situation, we're talking about anxiety. So this is a key thing to get to understand for ourselves and to help our children or our loved ones who experience anxiety to understand. So what we're thinking about here is this notion that it's okay to feel something. Not all behaviours are okay. But the feeling is okay, and sometimes we get these a bit mixed up. So what we're saying here is, for example, it's okay to be really angry about something. It's not okay to throw something because you're angry, or not okay to hurt someone. So the feeling is okay, but that behaviour would be wrong. Sometimes when we put in place a consequence for a behaviour that's not okay, the message that we're giving is that we're not okay with a feeling, like you shouldn't be angry because you're throwing things. What we really want to be careful to be clear with our kids and our loved ones is it's okay to feel angry, it's just not okay to throw something. So I thought this might be a kind of fun little way together to have a go at thinking about what it's like, what some of the situations are that you might come across, what it's like for a child, and what an adult situation might be that you can think of that might be similar to this child situation, and then we'll have a little think about what the emotion is that we're seeing happening there. So if you know of a child who has not been invited to a party, what do you think might be a similar situation that an adult might experience that we might be used to as adults? Some people typing, which is great. Lots of people typing, which is terrific. Yep, exactly, same thing. So not being invited to a function or a family event, being unsuccessful for a job application is a really good one. Or having, everyone goes out to lunch at work or some kind of social function and you're not invited. So have a bit of a think about how you might feel if that's the case. If everybody else is going out to lunch at work and they leave you at the desk, or sorry, if your family has a function and they invite everybody but you, what emotion do you think you might be feeling in that situation? Sad, confused, angry, rejected, upset, left out. Excellent. Betrayed, isolated. Terrific, guys. Can you see how there's lots of different emotions that you could be feeling? And all of those are correct. You could feel any of those things. And so sometimes when a child's not invited to a party, you can and appears to be really upset about that. It's easy for us to be a little bit dismissive of that and say, oh well, you know, you get to go to lots of parties. I really haven't got time to take you anyway, or you know, we'll do something else that's fun. But what we really want to do is stop and think about, you know, what would we feel like if that was our situation, if that same similar situation was for us, and that can help us understand what's going on for your child. What about starting school? What's a similar thing to starting school for us? Yeah, a new job, that's right. And a new job is a really common one, isn't it, that we jump to straight away. And that's true, starting a new job is like starting school. But if you think about it, as adults, we've started jobs and schools many times over our lifetime. So we've got a little bit of practice at starting things that are new. Yeah, moving town, moving to a new place might be more equivalent. Becoming a mum, that's right. That's quite a huge thing, isn't it? So all of those things, the emotion that we'd be feeling when all those things are going on is, you know, probably a combination of really nervous, really worried, but really kind of a bit excited as well, and a bit confused and a bit wary. So there's lots of different emotions we'd be feeling in that situation as well. What about this one, where this is really common, something we do a lot, being told to eat something you don't like? So what's a similar adult situation to being told that you have to eat something that you don't like? When was the last time any of us were told that they had to eat something that we don't like? Yeah, following a policy you don't agree with. We've got being told to do something you don't want to do. Yeah, or eating something that you don't want to at someone else's house. Having to put up with something that you would like to do differently, or sometimes for anybody who's in management, having to have your employees follow a rule that you don't agree with. Accepting new partners into a culture, yeah, and having to adhere to some I guess cultural expectations that you might not agree with, being pushed into doing something, working with something or in a way that you don't like. Great, well done, guys. And so maybe thinking about all of those things that I'm giving you, those examples, can help you have a bit of idea about what kind of emotions are generated. And there's a couple more there. If we just flick through them, we won't go through them all individually, but I hope you'll get a bit of an idea. Your younger sibling wearing your clothes without permission. So see if you can think of an adult situation that's equivalent to that. And a younger sibling wearing your clothes without permission is something that happens quite a lot, and that we often get a bit frustrated or annoyed with the younger sibling for taking the clothes, or even the older sibling for getting so annoyed and upset and angry about it. So they'll often have quite an intense reaction. But, you know, if we try and think what it would be like if, you know, somebody would just walk into our bedroom and take our clothes or wear it, you know, drive our car or do something without our permission. Being called ugly by a sibling is something we might be likely to dismiss. But if we think about what that would be like for us as an adult, what would be an equivalent situation? Not wanting to receive an academic award in front of your school friends. So that's something that can be hard for us to understand when we're really proud of our kids or proud of family members, and we're really excited to go along and see them, and they might be reluctant. What might that be like having to receive something or be applauded for something that you don't really want to do? Yes, Louise, performance anxiety is awful. I agree. Or being told to share your favourite new toy, and it's really easy for us to fall into the trap of doing this with young kids when because we most of us as parents want to encourage our children to share, and we don't like them to exclude other children by not sharing their toys. But, you know, imagine an adult equivalent situation being told to share your new and favourite toy. Be like, I guess, like getting yourself a really nice shiny brand new car, and then being told you had to hand the keys over and let somebody else have a drive of it when you've just got it. So these are all situations, I guess, that generate quite a lot of emotion. And this kind of exercise, when you can see a situation going on in your life and it's hard for you to understand why you're seeing such an intense emotion or why you're having to deal with an emotional situation, you can think a little bit about what it might be like for you when in a similar situation. Thanks, Grace. I'm glad you enjoyed that. It's something to think about, isn't it? It kind of gets us thinking a little bit. Standing in the shoes of children can help us understand why emotions are quite intense and why it's important not to just dismiss it and say, it's only, you've got 400 Pokemons, why do you not want to share that new one with your friend who's over? Okay, so we'll just pause for a second and see if there are any questions just about that notion that what we want to do is try and help our children to understand, or help the adults around us to understand, that the feeling that they're experiencing is okay. The feeling is normal. It's not something you have to be scared of or make go away. But what you need to learn to do is regulate your behaviour and do something a little bit different. That's a really good point, Di. How are you? Yes, his Beyblades might be the same as your new shoes. So imagine if, Di's got a little point, somebody tells you that you have to hand your brand new favourite best shoes over and share it with a sibling or a friend who's come over to play. And I guess the thing to think about, for us to think about in terms of helping our kids or family members to learn how to regulate their emotions a little bit better is to think, well, if you do require them to share their toy, have a bit of a think about the emotion they might be feeling and do a bit of emotion coaching around that. So you might say something like, it's okay to be feeling, disappointed or jealous that, you have to share that, but it's not okay to scream, or it's not okay to hit somebody, or it's not okay to break the toy. It's okay to be nervous about feeling and receiving an award in front of your school friends, but it's not okay just to not go to school for the day because you're feeling nervous about that. It's okay to be angry that your brother or sister's called you ugly, but it's not okay to retaliate in a way that's inappropriate. Grace got a lovely point there. I wish someone had been emotion coaching me. I often think it would be great, wouldn't it? Imagine if we learnt this earlier on. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll move on to the next little idea. But if you pop up with if you think of any questions, just pop up and write them in the chat there, and we'll be able to keep them on. Tony will keep an eye on them for us, and I'll be able to answer them. It's particularly if you've had a go at doing any of this, and when we're kind of working through the steps of the key things that we've learned, it prompts you with a memory of something that you tried and didn't work, or a situation where you got yourself a bit stuck, or think, how would you have done it? Could you have done it differently? Just give it, type your chat in and we'll answer it for you. Okay, the next thing that we talked about a little bit last week was when to emotion coach. So I guess we talked about how emotion coaching, so the skills we've learned in emotion coaching are actually quite difficult and time consuming. So we were kind of really noticing how it takes a lot longer to go through the 4 steps. So we were kind of really noticing how it takes a lot longer to go through the 4 steps of emotion coaching than it does to just, give the child the answer and say, well, here, I'm going to put the toy away then and not let you use it if you're not going to share it. So it takes longer, but it's worth it in the long run. One of the tricky things is to think about when you need to emotion coach and when you don't. So the little exercise we were going to do next is to I'll give you some scenarios, or the same scenario, a couple of scenarios, and we'll see whether this could be a good situation where you could emotion coach or not emotion coach. Okay, so we had a poll for that, Tony. So well, let's see if the poll is working.
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do is Tony's going to give you some poll questions here, and what I'd like you to do is have a think about whether this might be a good time to emotion coach or not. So here's the first scenario. You pick your child up from school and they seem quieter on the drive home. Might that be a good time to emotion coach or not a good time to emotion coach? I'm getting heaps of yeses and a couple of no's. Okay, so I would say that generally, yes, that's a reasonably good time to emotion coach. But there's probably a couple of situations where it might not be, depending on what's happening. So I guess what we're thinking here is you've noticed a behaviour that's a bit different, or you've noticed your child's a little bit different, and that's the step one, isn't it, of emotion coaching. So that is, stop and see if you can notice what emotion's going on. So you pick your child up from school, it's reasonably quiet. I'm assuming you're not in a hurry. They're a bit quieter on the drive home. That might be a really good time to emotion coach. So if you were going to emotion coach, what would you say? So for those who weren't here last week, we had quite a few helpful little sentence starters that we put out last week that we will send you home in some handouts at the end of the course, which helped us think about what to say. So so the first step is to notice what they're feeling. So you're looking at them, you're thinking they seem a bit quiet. What do you think they might be feeling? So have a go. And there's lots of answers here, but we'll pick one. So you might think they're a bit worried about something, or you might think they're a bit sad about something. Have a look at their face and their body language. See if you can pick up what you could see, and what would you say. So we've got a couple of examples here. So you could say, Sue's suggesting you could say, I can see you're a bit quiet. So that's a really good start. What we'd like to do though is use an emotion word as well. So quiet's a good start, but quiet is kind of the physical appearance or their behaviour. So we might say something like, I can see you're a bit quiet. I wonder if you're a bit worried about something. Or you look a little bit worried, or you look a little bit sad, something like that. That would be emotion coaching. So, so how was your day is a nice general question, Kirsty. So you could ask that. Usually often they'll just say something like, oh, good, or okay, if you want. So how was your day is a good question, but it's not an emotion coaching question. So if you were thinking that you wanted to emotion coach, if you were thinking that you might want to see if something's wrong here, if they're worried about something, an emotion coaching kind of question would be to put an emotion in a sentence. So something like, I can see you're a bit quiet, you seem a bit worried. And similar with your suggestion, Rayan, I think it's Rayan, I hope I've got that right. You seem a bit quiet, would you like to talk about your day? That's a general question, and they might say yes or they might say no, but it's not emotion coaching. So if you wanted to emotion coach, what I'd like you to do is put the emotion into a sentence. So something like, you seem a bit worried, or you look like you're a bit sad, or something like that. Great. Okay, try another one, and we'll have another go. Because as I said to you, I've said to you each week, I know you're sick of hearing me say it. It seems a really simple skill, but it's actually quite hard. So you've got to get a bit of a go at practicing and getting it right and getting it wrong a bit to see how you could do it. Okay. So you come in home and the kitchen is littered with empty food containers, and your teenager has eaten the food you planned for dinner. Is that a really good time to emotion coach? Great, heaps of no's. Okay, so no, it's not a good time to emotion coach because why? You would probably be furious when you walked in and saw the kitchen like that, and if you're really angry or you're in a hurry, they're not really good times to emotion coach. So a much better solution in that scenario is to do something else other than emotion coaching. So you might, speak to the kids and tell them that you're really angry. You might tell them you want to go and take a bit of a breath for a minute because you're furious. Something else, yeah, Remy's right, you would be the one in need of emotion coaching. That's exactly right. If someone's going to emotion coach you, that would probably be more appropriate in that situation. Okay. Okay. So we've got another one. So I can see there's quite a bit of chat going on, guys, which is really terrific. If any of you are chatting and actually wanting a question asked, please just let us know that you've got a question you want us to come back to. Otherwise, if you're happy just to chat and share your experiences, that would be terrific as well. Okay, next one, fire away. Your child said their best friend is ignoring them. Would that be a good time to emotion coach? Great, you're getting the hang of it? Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Because you're not in a rush, you're not angry. Presumably you've got enough time to do it at the time. Your child says they're ignoring them. It's a really nice time to emotion coach. So here's the tricky bit. What could you say? What would be an emotion coaching sentence that you could use? Now remember, what we want to do in emotion coaching is we want to see if we can identify what we think they might be feeling, and we want to put it in a sentence. Well done, Grace. That would be a really good one. Wow, that must really hurt. You seem upset. Terrific. Any of those kind of things that you could say would be terrific. That must make you feel really sad. That's great. I can see this really upset you. Well done, guys. You're all over it, which is terrific. I can see you're not using questions, which is terrific. You're just making a statement. And it sounds like some of you are trying to be a bit empathic or stand in their shoes, thinking about how they might be feeling. They're really good suggestions, which is you can see that's what you've got there, guys, is quite different to just saying something like, oh, well, you go and find another friend there, which is jumping straight to problem solving without emotion coaching first. Great, they're really good sentence starters. Well, let's have a look at the next one. I think they've got it here. Next one is...
We're up to number 3.
We are. It should be. I know we've just done that one. Sorry, Tony, that was my fault. I can't count where it must be up to 4. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Your teenager doesn't want to go to bed and you know there's a maths test tomorrow. Would this be a good time to emotion coach? Lee's realised it's number 4. We should have listened to Lee.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, so I can see there's a bit of yes and a bit of no here, and that's because this one is not clear. So you're both right, really. It could be yes and it could be no. So it might be yes if you can see that your child's pretty upset about it. You seem worried is a great start. Well done, Lee. That would be a terrific thing to say if you're going to emotion coach. If it's not something that happens all the time, if you're pretty confident it's not just a bed stalling kind of thing, which kids can get into the habit of. So bedtime is a tricky time to emotion coach. So I guess what I'd say is I wouldn't encourage you to make a blanket rule about emotion coaching at bedtime, because sometimes what happens is kids get into the habit of using chat at bedtime as a way to stall. But on the other hand, in fairness to your kids and to adults too, bedtime is often a time when you do start to notice your emotions, because of course you've got time to stop and think about it. And so these kind of emotions do sometimes come up. So Mel's got a great, if you're going to emotion coach, I understand you might be worried about tomorrow, but you need to get some rest. That is terrific, Mel, really well done. I guess you can't type it in, but I'm just going to remind everybody to put the pause in. So we look like we've nailed step 1, which is notice what the emotion might be that's going on, and we've nailed step 2, which is put it in a sentence. Step 3 is the pause. So if I was going to do Mel's sentence, I'd do it more like this. I understand you must be a bit worried about tomorrow, but you need to get some rest. So can you see how when I put the pause in, it slows it down, rather than me saying, I understand you must be a bit worried about tomorrow, but you need to get some rest. If you do it too quickly and don't put the pause in, your child or the adult that you're talking to doesn't get the chance just to stop and take in the fact that you understand how they're feeling. It's almost like the problem solving kind of washes past the emotion coaching. So if you were going to do Yeah, great, Rand. That's true. It does make it sound a bit more like a less demanding, or less like an instruction if you put the pause in, which is terrific. Now we've got another one, but Diane's got a question there, so I wonder whether I should stop for that for a sec. My daughter always says she has no friends. How do I support her? Yeah, you tend to say, okay, so Diane, I think that would be a really nice time to emotion coach. So what you're doing there by saying that you do have friends and name them is a really good strategy, but it's step 4 of the emotion coaching strategy. Yep, she's got autism, so it's going to take, she's going to need a little bit more help to learn about her emotions, but you could still do it. You could say, what do you think, have a think about what they might be feeling when she says that she hasn't got any friends, and put that in a sentence. So you might say something like, well, that must be, you must be feeling a bit sad about that if you feel like you haven't got any friends, or I wonder if that gets a bit lonely, or is that a bit disappointing that you're at school, whatever emotion you think she might be experiencing, and then pause for a minute, count to 5 quietly, and then say your solution there, which is, you do have a lot of friends, what about, and name them. So I encourage you to use the strategy you're using, Diane, but I would make it step 4 of the process instead of step 1. So do a bit of emotion coaching first and then move on to problem solving later. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Conscious of the time. Yep, so we'll keep moving on. So might do one more and then we might stop, because this is good refresher for those who weren't here last week to practice a little bit. Okay, so your teenager comes home 2 hours later than you agreed. Is that a good time to emotion coach? Yeah, so lots of no's, a couple of yeses. It's probably no, depending on whether or not that means that it's now 2 o'clock in the morning. If 2 hours later than you agreed is 2 o'clock in the morning and you're really tired and angry, then all those no's are right. That's not a good time to emotion coach, because you're grumpy and you're tired, you're annoyed. So it's that's not a good time for you. You'd be better to do it in the morning. But if it's if they're actually home after lunch, just say you said you need to be home by lunchtime and it's now 2 o'clock, and they come in and they look really upset about something, or really flustered about something, or something's gone wrong, that might be a good time to emotion coach. So you might say, instead of jumping on top of, where have you been 2 hours later, if you look at them and they look really upset about something, you might say something like, I can see that you're really upset, what's happened, that kind of thing. Yeah, great. Okay, so we might just move on to the last little bit of tonight's programming, given we have only got about 15 minutes left, but hopefully that's given you some practice for the guys who were here last week, and for those of you who missed last week's, a bit of a go at going through the 4-step process and coming up with some ways to start emotion coaching, or some sentence starters for emotion coaching. I'm really encouraged by how well you guys were able to come up with sentences there, which is great. Okay, another thing that we've talked about over the couple of weeks, which I think is really important just to remind you, and this is a little bit about, what to do if things still go wrong. First thing to do is to keep in mind that worry and anxiety are the hardest emotion, particularly for parents, really for anybody who's trying to support someone who's worried or upset, worried or anxious, but certainly for parents or for anybody who's working with children, it's the hardest emotion. And this is because what do we want to do as soon as someone's worried? We want to make them feel better. We want to take it away. We want to fix it for them. So we tend to jump straight into problem solving really quickly with worry or anxiety. Most adults will say that if a child is angry or frustrated or sad or embarrassed, they can manage it. You can give them a hug, or you can, help them calm down. But when they're worried about something, there's something about that really tugs at adults, and we really want to make it go away. So I guess I'm reminding you to help you, cut yourself a little bit of slack and just be a bit patient with yourself when you realise that that you might find that you're pretty good at emotion coaching through sad or disappointed or frustrated, but when it gets to worry, it's harder. You want to problem solve. So keep that in mind. And if you're getting stuck and you feel like your child's worry is increasing, the first thing to do is to stop and think whether or not you're emotion coaching or whether you're problem solving. So are you giving them the message that it's okay to be worried and that, worry is normal and that if, that you can still do things even though you're worried? Or are you giving the message that, the worry has to quickly be fixed and this is the way you can fix it by doing these things? So that would be my first thing to suggest, is to have a little think about the message that you're giving and how you're reacting to worry. And that's one of the key things. I mean, it's the first on our list of common challenges as well, is that when a child's worried, we want to make it go away, we want to fix it. And so another common challenge is to ignore your own response to emotions. So this is a little bit about thinking about how you feel about feelings. And this is part of what we were doing in the perspective taking task we did earlier, where we were thinking about what would be a common adult situation and what would be the emotion involved. This is about thinking how you think, how you feel about these emotions. So sometimes we can be really quick as adults to dismiss things. We can, something doesn't look scary to us, so we'll say, what on earth are you worried about? Don't be silly. There's nothing to worry about. Or, why are you annoyed about that? That's nothing. Why are you still thinking about that? You should just forget about it and get on with it. All those things are often because we feel like the emotion, that the situation is really small and we don't think it's worth worrying about. So we need to stop and think about how we're feeling about things. Another really common challenge is jumping to problem solving and forgetting the pause. And I noticed a few of you tonight were saying a combination of how much you really can see how that pause is helpful and you wish people would do it more around you, which is lovely, but that's the bit you forget. So that's step 3, where you've just got to pause and quietly count to 5. How important that is in emotion coaching and how quickly we forget it. So keep that in mind. Stop and count to 5 is what I suggest and I still do, and then problem solve afterwards. And you'll often find if you do this enough, that you won't need to problem solving. In that pause when you're quiet, your child will say something to you that's problem solving as well. So they might say something like, oh well, I'm just worried because I care about it. I'm going to go ahead and have a go at doing it anyway. And trying to emotion coach when you're already angry or frustrated or in a hurry, which is what we were just practicing then. So I guess they're the really common challenges, and we've talked about those over the last couple of weeks. What to do when strategies are not working. So these are pretty common strategies, and as I've said to you many times, actually learning this course, these skills, when I run groups and take parents through this, it's a 6-week course of 2 hours a session. So we get in a group and we meet for 6 weeks. We do role plays and we do scripts and we do practicing and we throw up scenarios and we talk it through. And so it takes a reasonable amount of time to learn it. So you might find that you've got the idea but you haven't quite got it working. So when that's the case, a good idea is to get a bit of assistance, and a good place to start is your GP. And your GP, if they can let you know if there's a good local psychologist, if you need a little bit of extra support. Sometimes it's really just someone where you can stop and talk it through and practice it and role play it a little bit like we've been doing here, but really getting those words right. Another thing, often schools can help, so teachers can often help, but another thing that people don't often think about is getting advice from someone who you know and admire, I guess. And by this I don't mean, some local rock star. I mean someone who you feel like is doing a pretty good job and at what they're doing, and you'd kind of like to do it the way that they do it. Those kind of people in our community, people at your local school or parents of other kids, or parents or friends that you know, can be a really, really good place to talk through some of these, some of the problems that you're having. And so you don't always have to go to a professional, but if you're going to take advice, my advice would be to listen to people whose opinions you value. So listen, so I wouldn't just ask advice of everybody around me. I'd think, now who's doing this in a way that I might like to do it, and have a bit of a chat to them. Okay, so I just want to comment on, Grace I think's put up a really good comment there about a pause, and I didn't think to mention that, Grace, so thanks for reminding me. Pausing is really good when you don't know what to say. It's a terrific skill because it doesn't usually look to the individual like you are, the person who you're talking to, like you've run out of words. It looks like you are listening or waiting patiently, or taking your time. So don't be afraid if you've got nothing to say or you don't know what to say. Don't be afraid just to be quiet and don't say anything. Okay, the other thing I wanted to touch on tonight is this idea of self-care. When we're thinking about what are the key things that usually get in the way, what are the things that make it hard for us to deal with our own anxiety or to deal with worry or anxiety in our kids or those around us, is to think about self-care. And this is the thing that usually is the bottom of our list and takes the lowest priority. But you don't have to do anything with self-care that is big and complicated. What you need to do is something for yourself. So it's really about putting something in your day that is something that you really want to do, even if it's just, stopping and looking out the window for a couple of minutes, just, looking at a tree or something out the window, or having a flick through a magazine, sitting in the sun or standing in the sun for a minute. It doesn't have to be long and complicated, but it needs to be something that you do for yourself. And I think Miss D's point's really important there. You have to give yourself permission. You often feel guilty because you're relaxing or you're doing something for yourself. And so I guess seeing that's probably a nice little way just to remind you, if you feel guilty when you feel like you're doing something for yourself, remember lesson number 1 that we did in the first week: all feelings are okay, not all behaviours are okay. So it's okay to feel guilty. Like, there's nothing wrong with feeling guilty, but I'd encourage you to feel guilty and still do something for yourself anyway, because you know that it's important. Okay, last point. And then we might just stop the question, if that sounds like a plan. Okay, last point. So this is another really important concept that I want to talk to you about in terms of what gets in the way and what can make it really, really tough, is this idea about being your own best friend. So this is thinking about the idea of self-compassion. So the idea of looking after yourself. And what I'd like you to do just for a minute is have a think about a struggle that you're having at the moment, something that you're finding a little bit difficult. And what I'd like you to do is imagine that you're talking to a really good friend, somebody you really care about, and you're telling them about this thing that's a bit difficult. And have a think about what kind of things that good friend might say to you. So I'd imagine they probably say something like, gee, I can understand that would be really difficult, and I'm really sorry to hear how hard that is. Is somebody helping you? Is there anything I can do? Are you looking after yourself? Do you want to have a cup of coffee? You want to talk about it? Like all those kind of things. And then have a think now about that same struggle and think about what you're saying to yourself about that. So if you're talking to yourself inside your head about this thing that's difficult, are you saying things like, gee, you're finding it a bit tough at the moment, you need to look after yourself, that's a really difficult situation, no wonder you're feeling a bit worried and unsure about that, that's really sad, I'm sorry to hear it, those kind of things? Or are you saying, what is the matter with you? If you were a bit better at this, you'd be fine, other people don't have these problems. Gee, all you do is complain, you've got to pull yourself together and get on with it, those kind of things. I'm tipping that you're probably like those kind of things. I'm tipping that you're probably likely to be much tougher on yourself than you would be on a really good friend. What have I done wrong? That's a really great Thanks for sharing that, Miss D. That's exactly what most of us do. So have you noticed that we're really hard on ourselves and we're much harder than we would be on a good friend? And this is really normal. This is human behaviour, but it's something to be really aware of, because if you're this hard on yourself all the time, it's only going to make everything worse and make yourself more upset. Imagine if that's what your friend said to you. You guys wouldn't be friends for all that long, would you? So I'd like to encourage you to think about this idea of self-compassion, which is a little bit treating yourself like your own best friend. So when you find yourself getting hooked up in thinking about, that you've done something wrong, or you're not good enough at it, or other people do this stuff better than you, or you're still complaining, or all those kind of things, think, well, if I was my best friend, what would I be saying to myself? And try and be a bit kinder to yourself. Okay, so any questions? I think there was a question up there. Did you catch it, Tanya? Will I scroll back? Or?
I'm happy to read too. Should I put us back on screen?
Oh yeah, maybe that's a good idea. I'm just going to have a little bit of water, guys, while we answer questions.
Go for it. Yep. I'll read the question while you're doing that. Just because it's coming to the end of the course, folks, so we've only got a few minutes left. Yep. As I mentioned in the chat box, try to get your questions in now, because after this you're going to be somewhat on your own, and we've only got Meredith for a little bit longer. Bettina had a great question about seeking additional support. Obviously in this course, Meredith, you've done a lot of talking about things that parents can do to get involved in supporting their child with anxiety and emotions in general. But Bettina was talking about an experience where she sought further support, and the psychologist seemed to really just want to work with her child and didn't really talk with her much about perhaps these kind of strategies.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice around, what she could do to get more individualized support, or navigating that kind of system?
Look, that's a really good question. Thanks, Bettina. And I think one of the things to think about is when you're seeking support, particularly when you're seeing a psychologist or a counsellor, is to remember that lots of psychologists, just like everybody else, all have slightly different approaches. So if you go to someone and their approach is not something that suits you, it's a really good idea to think about that early on and have a talk to them about what you need. So part of a psychologist's professional code of professional conduct is to make sure that you're getting what you need. So if you're talking to a psychologist who wants to work with the child, and lots of psychologists are like that, they want to treat the child, it would be a good idea to say to them, look, I'm actually looking for someone who will do a bit of parent work so that we can work on this together. Are you able to do that? And if not, can you recommend someone? And if they can't, go back to your GP or have a chat to, if your child's in school, counsellors at school will often have some ideas of some really good local child and family psychologists who work more with the family rather than just with the individual. So I'd go back and have another conversation either with your paediatrician or your GP clearly about what you want. So you want a psychologist who will work with you and give you some parenting advice. If that doesn't work, ask around, ask at schools, and even your maternal child health nurses, you can give them a call, find out who in your area will do some work that really meets your needs. Yeah.
Sounds good. Another question we had was from Rayanne, I hope I'm saying that right, about symptoms that go along with anxiety. She was saying that her son scratches when he's anxious, scratches himself. Any suggestions around managing those kind of behaviours going along with that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So this is really common too, and I think we had one about fidgeting earlier on in one of the earlier sessions, which is a bit similar. So my advice would be, Rand, really have a go at emotion coaching, as you've learned over the last couple of weeks, and see if you can get a bit of a handle on the emotions. So see if you can help him to manage his emotions a little bit better. And then when you're feeling like he's able to get his emotions down to a level that's a bit more manageable, so his worry reduces a little bit, get him to, then you'll be able to address the scratching. Yeah, he's 2, that's okay. He can still start to learn that he's feeling a little bit worried. So you can say that to him, and you can, and then the thing with a lot of these physical symptoms like fidgeting or hair pulling or scratching or flicking, these kind of things, is they often become a bit of a habit. So sometimes what you just need to do is remind them, even something like kind of gently putting their hand down, and you can even give them something else to do instead. So you can give them something to fiddle with, or something that will help give them something else to do to kind of break that cycle. But sometimes it's just a little bit of gentle prompting about, you know, a bit like when you're trying to get them to take their thumb out of their mouth, or, you know, those kind of things. See if you can do a little bit of physical intervention, but also let them know, like, you're a little bit worried, you know, and give them a bit of a hug so that they don't have to have a long conversation with you. But if you're using the emotion word and then you're giving them some reassurance and support around that, you're giving him the message that you understand how he feels or she feels, and that's okay. Good job.
Now we're nearly out of time.
Yep.
We might do one or two more questions very quickly that we've already received, folks. But just a reminder, if you do get a chance before we log off to have a look at our feedback questionnaire, I've shared the link in the chat and on the screen there. And just a reminder, it's a bit fiddly. You have to click on it, it'll open in a new window, and then you have to click open in a new window in that window, and it should actually load.
Yep.
Sorry, it's a bit of a runaround. So we'll do a couple more questions here quickly, and then we'll wrap up. Meredith, one raised by Mel, which I think you might have commented on indirectly along the way, is about when emotions seem to lead to avoidance.
Sure.
And you're emotion coaching, you're a bit worried that it's part of your child sort of avoiding things that they don't like.
Yeah, sure. So I would definitely address that specifically. So I would say something like, I can see you're really worried about that, but it's time to go to school. Or, you know, I can understand that you're feeling a bit nervous that because you're not very good at football, but you're on the team, and when it's a team sport, you need to participate. So that you're addressing the emotion first, and then you're dealing with the behaviour. And don't get into a big long cycle. You don't need to do a lot of talking about emotions. Actually, talking is a little bit overrated, to be honest. Sometimes, particularly girls, can get in the habit of talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, and there's not actually any action. We really want to keep it simple and say, we understand how you're feeling, but you can still do this thing anyway. You don't have to wait until you feel perfectly comfortable before you move forward.
All right, last one came from Nicole around negative self-talk.
Oh, yeah, I see that one up there, yeah.
She's concerned that her daughter seems to have a lot of negative self-talk, and how, I guess, your approach to way describing
sure.
fits with that. Or
yeah, sure, okay. So negative self-talk is a whole nother, topic that we could spend another couple of weeks talking about. There's certainly plenty you can do about negative self-talk. The worst thing you can do, though, is to get into an argument with them and try and talk them out of it. So, well, I guess it's not the worst thing. The worst thing you can do is totally ignore it and get angry at them. One of the least effective things to do, I guess, is talk them out of it. And you'll know this from yourself. If you think about it, do a bit of standing in, their shoes, like we did a bit earlier tonight. If you think about a time when you felt like you'd done something really badly and people kept saying to you, and somebody said to you, actually, no, it's not quite that bad, it'll be fine, did that help? The answer usually is, yeah, it probably did for a minute, but did it make it totally go away? The answer is usually no. So it might, that kind of, talking them out of it works for a minute or, a couple of minutes or even half a day, but just like it does with us as adults, that sinking feeling will come back, and they will start to, listen to what's going on inside their head again. So I guess the long answer is that there is quite a bit of stuff that you can do about negative self-talk, but we haven't got time to cover it tonight. But it might be a topic maybe for another webinar down the track, or that if you think that might be something to be useful. But you can apply the emotion coaching skills that you've learned here And that will be a big help. It won't fix it, but it'll go a long way, because what you'll be doing is letting them know that you understand how you feel, and that although you're not agreeing with with what is going on inside their head, you understand that that's hurtful. So you could say something like, I know that it really hurts when you get in, you think so badly about yourself. I find the same thing when I do it. I mean, I do personally, so I'd be happy to share that and say, sometimes I get that stuff stuck in my head, and that hurts me too, and it can be really difficult, and it's really frustrating. So I would talk a little bit like that, so that you're empathising and normalising it and opening up the conversation so they can talk to you about it a little bit more. And then, yeah, there's a couple of other things you can do to try and help them break the cycle, but it's probably another kind of hour thing that we would do step by step. So I think what I'm saying is what we've learned tonight is part of the solution, and then if you really can't break it up or get them to catch some of the good bits, it might be worth getting some assistance from someone if it's really getting on top of them, or we might think about running a webinar on negative self-talk another time down the track, maybe.
Okay, interesting idea.
Mm.
So on that note, folks, that's all we have time for, and that is our last session. Thank you so much for joining us for these live sessions and for accessing the recordings if you've been doing that. It's been a pleasure having you with us, and good on you for putting in the effort already into trying to do something to support your child. Remember to keep following through and try and make, implement some of these things that Meredith has been talking about at home. If we get the chance to run more of these sorts of webinars in the future, it'd be great to have you back, and you might be our sort of graduate group who can come along with particular questions and observations about how things are being done. So keep an eye on Raising Children Network for that kind of thing and other webinars as well. I'd very much like to thank Meredith for her time and effort in working on these webinars with us and providing some really great content and support for you at home. As always, remember, if you are feeling concerned or upset, you should seek some individualized support. These webinars aren't intended to solve those kind of specific problems for you. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening and the rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.